Eminent domain on them. They're having their council meeting tonight. Need somebody to go kick the crap out of somebody in there. You can't just take God's land. And I don't know why they just put up with that stuff, but you can't let people do that to you. So if you feel like praying for fools, they got to have the craziest and stupidest lawyer on the planet. So you can't let people do stuff like that to you. Revelation. Sometimes, you know, as much as you sympathize with them, sometimes you got to sit back and say they deserve it for being so stupid. You got 4,000 people in the church and they hire a lawyer that's so lame. I'd have called Costco every day. Revelation 18. I'd have had everybody in church calling Costco. Just tell them off. I bet you Costco would have left. Revelation 18, verse number 9. And again, we're identifying, we're still dealing with, the kids can go, dealing with the great whore, that harlot of Revelation, false religion, that system. And again, it's a system that's crept up. It's a system that's literally entwined itself in the social life of many nations, to the extent that kings, preachers, even God's saints are all caught up in her. Chapter 18, verse 9 says, "The kings of the earth who've committed fornication live deliciously with her, shall bewail her and lament her when they'll see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour the judgment is come. The merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her. No man can buy her merchandise anymore. The merchandise of gold, silver, precious stones, pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, scarlet, thine wood, all manner of vessels of ivory, vessels of most precious wood, brass, iron, marble, cinnamon, odors, ointments, frankincense, wine, oil, flour, wheat, beasts, sheep, horses, chariots, slaves, and the souls of men. The fruits that thy soul has lusted after, they're departed from you, and all the things which were dainty and goodly are departed from you, and you shall find them no more at all. The merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, the great city, which was clothed with fine linen, purple, scarlet, decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. In 1 hour so great riches has come to nothing. Every shipmaster, everyone in company of ships, the sailors, as many as trade by sea, stood afar off." Now, again, by reading the criteria of Babylon here, exactly the description, you start to find that this is not merely a religion as we look at it or as we view it. This is literally a religion that took hold by virtue of the fact that it literally becomes a part of our everyday life. This became that, or this is that which becomes from that system that began in Babylon, that which Daniel referred to as the head of gold, Nebuchadnezzar, that image that doesn't fall until the end times when Jesus comes in the stone kingdom and establishes his kingdom. So we're done with Revelation there, at least with that book, and coming back to Hitler. That's where we left off. We left off, I think, in Pat Buchanan's Death of the West. We're reading a portion of what he wrote concerning the Christian influence in the West that needed to fall. But we're talking about also, and again, I just want to keep our minds fresh that we're still dealing with Hitler, this crazy guy, the one that gets to blame for just wanting to annihilate Jews just because he hated them. He was a bad guy. And if we believe that, we haven't been taught history properly. I'm not telling you he was a good guy. He's a piece of crap as far as I'm concerned. But he was allowed to rise up. He was nurtured to rise up. And he was even backed financially. And then nobody wants to take credit for it anymore. He put a cross on Henry Ford. And he's known as the great industrialist of America. Nobody tells you about how Henry Ford helped contribute to his war machine. That's like your drunk uncle, man. You keep him in the closet. You don't tell anybody, your cousin's gay. You don't invite him to the parties where your friends are coming. Right? There's just some things you don't tell. And that's what, for the most part, this stuff is. All right. They launched a campaign. This is Hitler. Hitler not only failed to bring about the British alliance, but he earned the enmity of the Nazi warlords who advocated totalitarian methods for solving the very complicated and dangerous problems that Germany was facing. They did not want an alliance with England. They did not want to see Christianity flourish. Now, what's strange about this is here you've got the Germans. And again, as we've traced the lineages, as we've traced these, I want to say the ethnics across Europe, remember when we were talking about how when Babylon literally defeated Syria, and Babylon comes to power, Syria that had already had transplants from Israel, because you have to remember what happened during the time of the Syrian reign when they came and began to transplant Israel. Remember that? They transferred Israel up into the northern portions. And all of a sudden, here comes Babylon. Well, when Babylon took over, the Israelites were already attacking Syria from the inside. So it had already had a weakened infrastructure. So when Babylon rises up and Babylon says to the Jews, we don't have any problem with you because you're nothing but victims of the Assyrians, but we have problems with the Assyrians. Remember, as we trace the migrations, what happened to the Assyrians? Not only did the Israelites migrate north and to the west, what did the Assyrians say? The Assyrians says, hey, we don't want these Babylonians to kick the daylights out of us. And what did the Assyrians do? They followed the migration of the Israelites north and into the west. So when we talk about these Germans or these people, they were called the Alemanis, which literally meant the hill people. As we start to describe these migrations that come across, it wasn't strictly Arabian, it wasn't strictly Egyptian, it wasn't strictly Hebrew Jewish. It was a migration of many groups, one specifically that comes to hang out in Germany. Many of them Assyrian by stock. So suddenly you have a Christianized Europe. Hitler rises up, gains his power through a workers' union, and now this regime has an interest in breaking down not only the structure of Europe, but the structure of Christianity. Now, what have we found out about Christianity in Europe? What is it that we've learned about that? Why did this Bolshevik grassroots revolution fail? Because at its backbone was 2,000 years of Christianity. And when you've got 2,000 years of Christianity embedded into you, when it's time to rise up, it ain't going to work. Let's go on and read. All right. They did not want to see Christianity flourish. They did not agree with Hitler's preventative measures. They didn't agree with anything Hitler did to hinder their plan to wage total war against Russia, against Britain, France. The hardcore of the pagan Nazi warlords demanded that Hitler take an offensive action for the best defense against gradual encroachment by the communist underground and Stalin's armed forces. This is talking about their little struggle with the Russians. When Hitler refused to go all the way with them, he decided to get rid of him. Now, this is funny because Hitler and Russia had this strange relationship because everybody knows about how the Russians literally were turned on by Hitler. Everybody said there was an agreement. Everybody knew there was an agreement between the Russians and the Germans that there would be non-aggression. And Hitler turned on them. But does anybody know that before they were enemies, that it was Russia who was secretly financing the German war machine to be built? Everybody knows they hated each other during the war, but nobody knows that the Russians were the ones that helped finance their war machine. They launched a campaign to sell their Aryan pagan ideology to the German people. Now, this is what's funny. How do you take a people that literally at this point, when we talk about Germany during this time, these are great industrialists, man. This is a time in Europe when literally there were restrictions taken off of businesses to the extent that the business not only began to flourish, but people began to be employed. I mean, this machine of commerce began to work so well in Germany that good things were happening. Suddenly you get a guy like Hitler. How do you get a guy like Hitler to come in all of a sudden sell this pagan propaganda to these folk? They launched a campaign to sell their Aryan pagan ideology to German people. They taught the superiority of the Aryan race. They advocated war to establish the undisputed supremacy of the Aryan state. They made it a fundamental principle that all men and women of Aryan blood should give unlimited obedience to the head of the Aryan state and acknowledge no mortal as above him. This campaign was attributed to Hitler. The anti-fascist press throughout the world cried to high heaven that Hitler was a pagan and a black-shirted totalitarian-minded Nazi warlord. Thus started the clashes between the Catholic and the Protestant clergy and the state. Now, when we first started talking about Hitler, one of the things we began to speak about was how initially the churches supported him because they thought this was a guy that was helping the workers. Because you have to understand that whenever you allow freedom to business, or freedom to what people refer to as capitalism, when you allow freedom to capitalists, what begins to happen is a capitalist begins to immediately research and develop, begins to immediately make things happen to make more money. That's what capitalism is all about. How do I, unrestricted by government, begin to make a lot of money? And the best way to do that is to literally start to research, begin to develop, begin to find and innovate, create, invent. And as these things begin to happen, creates jobs, creates a big economy. Then what happens is the people that are working get upset when they find out that the boss makes a lot more money than them and that they're just working schmucks, and they don't like that. So Hitler comes along, and with this Workers' Party, and this is the way it works, there's always people that have, and then there's people that don't have. And then the people that don't have get mad at the people that have. It's just human nature. So there was a clash now between the Catholic, Protestant clergy and the state. The clergy condemned the Nazi ideology on the grounds that those who preached it were preaching the deification of men. That doesn't surprise anybody. What's socialism? Socialism is everybody gets. Socialism is everybody's going to get their portion. Socialism basically means nobody's excluded, everybody the same, everybody's going to get some. So National Socialism is about the government's going to take care of the fact that everybody's going to get theirs. Now that's evil. Because some people don't deserve theirs, right? That's why some of us get older and we don't want to be Democrats anymore. Somebody grows up, you finally grow up and you finally say, wait, I've been paying all this money for everybody to get a little something and not everybody has something. What's the deal? Huh? Charles, now that you're successful, now that you finished college, now you got to get your money and give it to those people you grew up with that don't amount to a hill of beans. Give them money. Anybody want to give them money? I want to give them money. That's why they're bums in the street. Then they call them homeless. They ain't homeless. They just don't want to be in a house where somebody has rules. People always say, I ain't got nowhere to go. Everybody's got somewhere to go. You just got to live by somebody's rules, and they're not willing to. So they'd rather sleep in the street. Let them have it. Oh, but it's cold. They got to brave the elements. It's their choice. Why are we worried about them? Somebody always wants to make it your problem. Then they want to make it the church's problem. The Nazi leaders charged both the Catholic and Protestant clergy were breaking the laws by defying the authority of the state. The Roman Catholic and Protestant bishops replied by stating the extreme Nazi doctrines were antagonistic and contrary to the divine plan of creation. The Nazi leaders countered the argument that the church had no right to interfere with the matters of the state. We'll skip a little. In a pastoral letter dated August 19, 1938, the bishops in Germany struck out boldly against the Nazi ideology. The letter says that the attitude of the Nazi toward the Christian religion in Germany was in open contradiction with the Führer's assertions. What is aimed at is not merely checking the growth of the Catholic Church, but the wiping out of Christianity and setting up in its place a religion which is utterly alien to the Christian belief in one true God. Now, Hitler's coming to power. Now, see, this is one of the reasons why this is important. Because everybody thinks that because we won the war in Germany and because Hitler committed suicide, that these ideas are over. Right? Are these ideas finished? Just because Hitler's dead, does that mean that people do not want to be National Socialists? Now listen, my skin is brown, and I'll be the first to tell you. If you got color on your skin, they all want something from somebody. It's like that group of idiots running around with their slogan, "You owe us." They want something. Everybody wants something. Where do these attitudes come from? And again, what is the whole idea behind somebody saying, "You owe us," is to already put yourself in a class that is below and under. And somebody says, well, that's where they put us. Well, listen, if we had any substance, is that where they keep us? When we were in Modesto 2 weeks ago, I guess it's the trying to remember what organization that is. It puts out the highest paying jobs. And in fact, the minute I read it, I told Mark, I got to show this to Jay Louvier, because the second to the last crummiest job in America was cowboy. I can't remember what the last place was. It said something about cowboys, have it rough. And I looked at it, and they listed the worst job in America, the number 2 from the bottom, was being a cowboy. So I picked that up and said, hey, I'm going to show this to Jay Louvier. Do you know what the number 1 highest paying job in America is? Take a guess. Anybody take a guess? Nope. That's close, Charles. NBA basketball. Highest paying job in America is to be an NBA basketball player. Now, 71% of the ball players are black. That's their pay, their average pay. The number 1 highest paying job in the whole country is being an NBA basketball player. Now, is there more black guys with that job or white guys? Well, how about we even the scales? Huh? It don't matter. I mean, you go to the hospital and say, where's the black doctors? They didn't pass the test. We don't care. We want them. How come we can't do that to the NBA? Do you know what the number 2 highest paying job is in the country? NFL. Baseball, number 3. So who holds the highest paying jobs in our country? Huh? Black Puerto Ricans? Huh? Dominicans? Couple Japanese? I mean, you got your white folk in there, but the highest paying jobs in the country are held by who? Black people. Right? That's what it said in this. That's what this job census was. Now you think those guys are running around yelling, "They owe us"? No, I'm just asking the question, because you got these people running around saying they owe us. Do you think all those NFL, Major League Baseball, and basketball players are running around saying they owe us? Or have they achieved the highest status? I'm just asking, because these ideas of Hitler, they're still around. And that's what literally traps us into this system that Babylon encompasses. So what is aimed at is not the mere checking of the growth of the Catholic Church, but the wiping out of Christianity and setting up in its place a religion which is utterly alien to the Christian belief in one true God. Now, listen, you heard me say this. I told you, don't glory so much in this Catholic Church scandal, because it's going to start out with Catholic. Now, listen, these guys in the Catholic Church, they're priests. They call them fathers, padres in the Southwest. You notice they're starting to call them pastors on the news? And today, on the radio, they were blasting a pastor because he'd been sleeping with the gals. You think it's going to end with the Catholic Church? All right. What happened in Germany in 1936 has happened in other countries since. The leaders of the black Nazism joined forces with the leaders of the red communism in an attack on both the Christian religion and the British Empire. Now I want you to notice something. You cannot separate the Christian religion from the British Empire or from the West. Can't be separated. One was built on the other. If their idea to bring in this National Socialism was only hampered, if we read historically that the only thing that kept this great Bolshevik, this grassroots workers' revolution from happening was that there was 2,000 years of Jesus taught, what changes things? How do you change things? Huh? You get rid of God. You get rid of Jesus. How do you do that? Huh? How do you get rid of Jesus? Education. All right. Hitler antagonized international bankers. No, we'll let that go for now. Hitler did a few things that the Christians got happy about. Like one of them was he shut down the Grand Orient Lodges of the Masons. And the Christians all cheer. That's like every time the government says something like, we're going to shut down, these cult groups. The Christians all cheer, not knowing that they're next. That's why I think we need to understand that when a religious cult or a religious group rises up, we have to, as Christians, be willing to condemn a doctrine that isn't Jesus's, but we have to be willing to say, hey, let stupid people talk. That's what freedom is about. We have to give stupid people the ability to talk, because stupid people, they'll bury themselves. You let stupid people talk long enough, nobody will listen to them because they're stupid. See, we have to have confidence in America, in America's ability, as far as the people's ability, to recognize stupid people when they talk. So what happens, America always wants to shut down their voice, saying, oh, that's dangerous speech, as if we're not smart enough to figure out what stupid is. So Hitler did a few things just like the government does, in that he says we're going to shut down these Masonic temples that are responsible for these cult worships. And in doing so, the Christian churches and the Catholic churches, they had to applaud Hitler. Very good, Hitler, very good. Not knowing that they were in the crosshairs next. Now, back to Death of the West. Now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is where we left off. We left off in a chapter called The Frankfurt School Comes to America. About the same time, music critic Theodor Adorno and psychologist Erich Fromm, sociologist Wilhelm Reich joined the Frankfurt School. And again, the Frankfurt School was that school that was instituting Marxism in Europe, in Germany. In 1933, history rudely intruded. Adolf Hitler ascended to power in Berlin, and as the leading lights of the Frankfurt School were Jewish Marxists, they were not fit for the Third Reich. So when Hitler came to power, these people couldn't stay in Frankfurt. So they left. Where do you think they went? New York. Now, let me ask you this, man. How come these Jewish and Marxist scholars that want to promote this extreme socialism, they don't fit in Nazi Germany, and they come to a country that literally is formed and based on Christianity, and we welcome them with open arms? I'm not saying we should have kept them out. I'm just telling you that's the nature of our government. That's the nature of what America is. You let people talk. That's part of the greatness of this country. You got to let people talk. So they come into this country. The Frankfurt School packed this ideology and fled to America because they were going to get beat up over here. Also departing was a graduate student by the name of Herbert Marcuse, and we spoke about him, sociologist. If you study sociology, is one of the guys that frames this type of socialism. With the assistance of Columbia University, probably one of the most prestigious schools out in New York, especially known for its law degrees that it issues. With the assistance of Columbia University, they set up their new Frankfurt School in New York City and redirected their talents and energies to undermining the culture of the country that gave them refuge. How do you like that? That's like the homeless guy that you take into your house, and as soon as you take him in, he starts making plans on how to ruin your house. Now, how can people put up with this? Among the new weapons of the cultural conflict of the Frankfurt School developed was critical theory. And again, you can't graduate from any college in this country without taking these critical thinking courses. These courses in what they call, they literally refer to these courses as courses that are going to teach you how to spot fallacies, logic, critical thinking. They want you to look at everything cynically. If somebody says something, presume he's lying. The name sounds benign enough, but it stands for a practice that is anything but benign. One student of critical theory defined it as essentially a destructive criticism of all the main elements of Western culture, including Christianity, capitalism, authority of the family, patriarchy, hierarchy, morality, tradition, sexual restraint, loyalty, patriotism, nationalism, heredity, ethnocentrism, convention, and conservatism. Now, I was laughing because when we were cleaning out the building, Danzan found a big stack of these copies of the Declaration of Independence. And a lot of people, especially the church, the church is so weak. The church, I've said it often, the church has become like a whore. It can't say no. The church is just like a whore that can't say no. If people are crying about something, the church just can't take a stand. This is why, to an extent, I admire the Baptists, Somebody says, what about women in ministry? And the Baptists had their convention, and they came out of the convention and said, no. They didn't care that everybody condemned them. They said, no, I have to respect them for that. You know, these Catholic churches get together. They don't know what to make of it. Should we make women priests? We don't know. How can you not know? What does the church think of it? Where are the women disciples? How come Jesus didn't pick women disciples? How come there's no gate in heaven named after a woman? How come there's no patriarch of the Old Testament named after a woman? It's because the system of God is based on a patriarchal system. That's why he's known as God the Father. He's not known as God the Mother. He's not a single parent. We don't need to play games with this crap. Anyway, Dan Zan finds these copies, and I said, oh, those are nice, Zan. I said, isn't it a shame that nobody even wants to talk about the Declaration of Independence anymore? Because, in fact, Whitney, why don't you do me a favor? They're sitting right on my desk. Go get them. Nobody wants to talk about that thing anymore because they don't want to let people talk. That's why all the kids come home and say things like, I feel like that's wrong. I don't give a damn what you feel. What do you think? What's 2 plus 2? I feel that that's 4. What's wrong with you? It has nothing to do with how you feel. Why all of a sudden is school about how people feel? I told you about my daughter. She gets sent home with a picture of an Indian watching the settlers land. What do you think the Indian's thinking? I know what he's thinking. I need to move. There goes the neighborhood. You know, they had that one Indian on that commercial when I was a kid where some guy would throw some trash out the window and he stands there with a tear in his eye. Now, I know why he was crying, because the white man done dirtied up his land. But I'm going to tell you what, that Indian is going to have a lot easier time walking on that paved road than he would be walking through the woods. Huh? Why don't you give one of those to everybody? Now, I want you to see all the signatures down there, especially the most prominent, the John Hancock, right? Now, you want to know what's a real shame? You want to know what's a real shame? Is that people look at this and say, ha! They had slaves. Screw these guys. Now look, I'm not lying to you. We live in the greatest country in the world. But people look at this and say, yep, these guys were slave owners. Yep, these guys were white. Yeah, these guys believed that God had destined them to take this land. Screw them. Right? Now, listen, I'm going to tell you, I'm not lying to you. That's what everybody's being taught. That's what you're learning in the university. Screw them. We don't need these people. And we don't need what they wrote. And that's why y'all going to be wearing jumpsuits when the New World Order comes. Hey, let me ask you a question. How many slaves did Abraham have? Servants. Huh? Paul said, if you're a slave, stay a slave and work for your master like unto the Lord. Screw this. Isn't that how they would? Same logic, isn't it? And you go throw away the greatest document God has ever given to man. Hey, look, I'm not lying to you. You know, in some states in this country, they don't celebrate Washington's birthday. That's why they just say President's Day. We just had Memorial Day, and you know a lot of people don't even know what Memorial Day's for. I was remembering when I was young, this is no lie, Whitney remembers, you used to have to get all the gas you can on Friday because ain't nothing open for 3 days, right? Because it was sacred to memorialize those men who died and gave their lives for the freedom that we enjoy here. That was the rule. I was driving down the street on the way to a barbecue at Mark's house yesterday for Memorial Day. And I looked at the parking lot of Target, Home Depot, and all them other things. Boy, they were memorializing, all right. Now, what do your kids think Memorial Day is? Huh? Circus City? Start of the summer shopping season? Home improvement time? Huh? People talk about Thomas Jefferson and they say, oh, he was screwing his slaves. Huh? So we don't want to listen to him. How about Adams? Oh, slave owners, all of them. Well, I guess we can throw out his statement that all men are created equal, right? I'm just telling you, this is why nobody pays attention to these documents anymore. Because they poisoned the well. These men were flawed. How about Peter? The woman says to Peter, surely you're one of them. You walk with Jesus. And Peter says, not me, baby. So Peter would have been irrelevant on the day of Pentecost when he preached the first sermon. Now, why do we think this way? You want to know why? Because Babylon has taken hold. That's why I tell you, don't be so happy because you see the Catholic priests getting nailed for being homosexuals. Because we're right in line. I know preachers that are gay. They're homos, man. And the media just can't wait to expose them fellas. And what are they really trying to do? They're trying to knock the faith out of people. All right, so this Frankfurt School comes out to Columbia University and begins to establish within their core curriculum critical thinking. What does critical thinking do? Critical thinking takes something like this and says, when the course of human events it becomes necessary for people to dissolve the political bands which connected them with another. Wait a minute, what political bands? This critical thinking. Wait a minute, what if our bands are not political but religious? Oh, this don't apply to me, right? That's like when you tell somebody, you can't sleep with another woman because you got a wife. And somebody says, oh, Brother Daniel, don't judge him. He doesn't have to live to your morality. That's not my morality. That's God's morality. That's not right what you're doing. And somebody says, Brother Daniel, you can't judge people. If you say, man, you stole that bike. Somebody says, oh, Daniel, don't judge him. It might be stealing to you, but it wasn't to him. Yeah, that's it. And then they use words like that. He just borrowed it. Huh? It's like a kid that gets caught stealing a car. When I was a kid, Grand Theft Auto, it put you in jail. Nowadays they say, oh, come on. Among the new weapons of the cultural conflict in the Frankfurt School developed was critical theory. Essentially, it was a destructive criticism of all the main elements of Western culture, including Christianity, capitalism, authority, family, patriarchy, hierarchy, morality, tradition, sexual restraint, loyalty, patriotism, nationalism, heredity, ethnocentrism, convention, and conservatism. Using critical theory, for example, the cultural Marxist repeats the charge that the West is guilty of genocidal crimes against every civilization and culture it encountered. How many times have you heard that? Those poor Indians. How many times you got to be reminded that white people put Indians on reservations? Huh? Look, I'm going to tell you something. I got brown skin, so I don't mind telling you. There comes a point where if the white man says, look at here, we put you on the reservation, but we feel it's too fertile and green for you, and we like it. So we'd like to move you over to this more barren piece of desert for y'all to live happy. How come they didn't rise up and just kill as many white folk as they could? Huh? You don't let yourself get enslaved like that. Somebody said, well, they were just so trusting. So trusting. Man, they've been lied to every time they turned around. Could you imagine? You could walk up to an indigenous American. See, I'm talking in euphemism now. A pre-Columbian. And you come to him with some plastic and mirrors and say, how about some bear skins? And what happened? They give it to you. Now look, if I came up to Charles and gave him some plastic beads and a plastic ring and said, can I have your car? And he gave me the car, what would you think of Charles? I'm asking the question, what would you think of Charles? If I walked up to Whitney, gave him a mirror, and he gave me all his gold, what would you think of Whitney? Huh? Yeah, Sandra wasn't home. But see, that's when I whip out the beads. See, that's when I pull out the glass beads. I'm just telling you that there is a lot to gripe about, but when all you hear is that the white man is responsible for everybody's genocide, everybody's demise, everybody failing, everybody hurting, everybody poor. Oh, they gave the Indians fire water. They turned them into drunks. Really? They held a gun on their head and made them drink, huh? Oh, they gave the Aztecs the flu. It's true, right? But they didn't all die. So one of the thoughts or one of the ideas behind this whole ideology is you got to keep shouting of how white folk just ruined everything. Let's read some more. These ideas have been internalized. As early as the mid-1960s, conservative and authority figures denounced or opposed campus revolutions were routinely branded as fascists. Baby boomers were unknowingly following a script that ran parallel to the party line laid down by the Moscow Central Committee in 1943. You think they knew that during that time? You want to know what it said in 1943 in the Moscow Central Committee? It says, members in front organizations must continually embarrass, discredit, and degrade our critics. When obstructionists become too irritating, label them as fascists, Nazis, or anti-Semitic. That sounds like what the Democrats do every time a Republican talks. Huh? If somebody says, no, Whitney, I don't believe in reparations for blacks, what do they say to me? Racist. Do they even take into account my study, my research, my argument? But they say racist, right? And what happens to me? I got to spend all my time trying to tell people I'm not a racist. But see, according to the definition of racist that's now accepted, I can't be a racist because I'm brown. Right? Isn't that what they say? If your people aren't the dominating class with the power to do anything or to exercise the will, you can't be a racist. So I can't be a racist. So this was, now, could you imagine, this is what they do today, but it was written in 1943 by the party line in Moscow. When members of front organizations, or members and front organizations must continually embarrass, discredit, and degrade our critics. When obstructionists become too irritating, label them as fascist, Nazi, anti-Semitic. The association will, after enough repetition, become a fact in the public mind. Since the 1960s, branding opponents as haters or mentally sick. Now, this is the 1960s. If I say, God does not like homosexuality, what do people call me? Homophobe. What is a homophobe? I'm sick, right? If I say, I am the man of my house, I am the head of my house, what do people say? He's a misogynist. What's that? I'm sick, right? Listen to the language. I'm telling you. This is why I use the words I do. I want people to understand exactly what I'm saying. If you say, I am the patriarch of my house, what do the people say about you? Man, you're a Nazi. They call you a Nazi. Since the 1960s, branding opponents as haters or mentally sick has been the most effective weapon used in the arsenal. That's a nice one, huh? So the next time somebody says something like, you Christians are hypocrites, just say, how long have you been a homosexual? I'm just telling you, nobody, see, we all know, see, we're the only ones that don't recognize this as a fight. We all want to be cool and pacifist. Like Bayless. They said they're going to hold hands around the city council meeting and pray. They're going to take their $14 million piece of land and exercise eminent domain. They're going to hold hands and pray. What? See, somebody needs to stand up in city council and say, excuse me, is it because we're a church and you're homosexuals? Mr. City Councilman, I know in our church we preach the Bible, and your mother hates the Bible because she's a lesbian and an atheist. Has that affected your thoughts? Look, I'm just telling you how to play the game. Because that's how they do you. You try to tell somebody, my kid got out of hand and I spanked him. What do they say? You're an abuser. Immediately they call you a name, and we're okay. When you stand up for the things of God, they look at you and say, oh, he's an extreme right wing, or he's one of these extreme, Christians. What do they call them? Radicals. What are they calling us names for? And we don't even have any idea that this has been a plot and an agenda that's been laid down, and Hitler actually helped promote it. And people don't want to associate with Hitler, do they? All right, let's read some more. If you want to debase a person, what a person is doing, call him mentally ill. Isn't that how they do things? You want to debase somebody, you just say he's crazy, right? Now listen, if a man takes another man in the bathroom of a public park, that's okay because they're different. But if you speak against it, you are a homophobe. You're mentally ill. Let me get this straight. This guy doesn't know input from output. This man don't know entrance from exit. And he's different. But if you're a Christian and you say something, you're sick. And that's okay. And Christians just, and here's what the church does. The church just steps back and leaves it alone. Mr. City Councilman, I am guilty of speaking such against these men, but can you please draw me a picture of what they were doing so that I can understand why this is different? Why this is different and I'm sick. Why I need to go to what they call sensitivity training, and he's the one that was screaming. I need to go to sensitivity training. But these fellas don't need anything. And that's okay. Right? I'm just asking questions. Because the church I'm telling you, the church is like a whore. Just can't say no. Don't want any trouble. Let me ask you a question. When the Egyptians began to oppress the children of Israel, what did God do to Egypt? He brought plagues and jacked them up. Now, when they weren't under the oppression of a nation, and another nation came to Israel and said, we want to take you, what would happen? Israel would rise up and kill folk. Right? I mean, and I'm not advocating Christians need to go to war. What I'm saying is Christians at least need to learn the prayers that were used by these people when they said, Lord, fill their town up with lice and frogs. Give them the locust treatment. God, give them hemorrhoids in secret places. Because that's what it says in the Bible. The Bible says when the Philistines took the ark, he gave them hemorrhoids in secret places. That's what the Bible says. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm just saying that how come the church is just like a whipping boy? They can make fun of the church. I feel sorry for the Catholics. Poor old Pope John. The guy, he reminds me of one of them puppets. He comes out, he can't even move his arm anymore. There's more movement in that crypt keeper on the Tales of the Crypt. Look, I'm just telling you, this is the figure. This is the vicar in the Catholic religion. This is the vicar of Christ. Can't even say anything. And the church world just getting whooped and beat and just whooped and beat every single day, and nobody says nothing. Because the church is so afraid of being called a name like you're insensitive, you're a bigot, you're racist, you're a fascist. So the church rather just not say nothing. All right? If you want to debase what a person's doing, call him mentally ill. Behind it is all a political agenda. Our sick society is in need of therapy, and to heal itself of its innate prejudice. See, so the real political motive behind these tactics is that we're sick and we all need help. And they go help us. That's why if you say something like, if somebody says something like, hey, Whitney, we're going to take away your check because you owe taxes. If Whitney gets mad and socks me in the eye, it's like, oh, sorry, you're sick. We're going to have to take you to anger management. Wait a minute. I thought we were a free society. How come somebody can actually come and say, you go to anger management or you're fired? Huh? And let me ask you this. Who runs anger management courses? And who are these people? If I ever went to anger management, my sole job in that class would be to see that guy get angry. Sir, when did you stop beating your wife? Because human nature is human nature. Assessing the Frankfurt School Studies in Prejudice, of which the authoritarian personality was the best known, Christopher Leish wrote, the purpose and design for studies in prejudice dictated the conclusion that prejudice, a psychological disorder rooted in the authoritarian personality structure, could be eradicated by subjecting the American people to what amounted to be collective psychotherapy, by treating them as inmates of an insane asylum. Now let's read this again. The purpose and design of studies in prejudice dictated the conclusion that prejudice, a psychological disorder, rooted in the authoritarian personality structure. Stop there. Who is the authoritarian personality in the base structure of American society? It's the father. So they have dictated that what makes society sick is fathers. Let's read some more. This is the root of the therapeutic state, a regime where sin is redefined as sickness, crime becomes antisocial behavior, and the psychiatrist replaces the priest. If fascism is, as Adorno says, in the culture, then all of us raised in that God and country culture of the 1940s and 50s are in need of treatment to help us come face to face with the prejudices and bigotries which were marinated from birth. Another of the insights of Horkheimer and Adorno was to realize that the road to cultural hegemony was through psychological reconditioning. Now listen to the words, psychological reconditioning. Does anybody like the idea of being psychologically reconditioned? Now, we're old. We're already off the track. But do you understand why your kids are taught the crap they're taught in school? Because they're being psychologically reconditioned. They'll look at you and say, Dad, you're sick. Right? All right. Through the Frankfurt School, there remains unfamiliar to most Americans its ideas, well known at the teachers' colleges back in the 40s and 50s. The school openly stated that whether children learned facts or skills at school was less important than they graduate conditioned to display the correct attitudes. So they don't care if you learn, they just care that you come out like they want you to. When Alan Bloom wrote in The Closing of the American Mind that American high school graduates are among the most sensitive illiterates in the world. That's because they're all so sensitive. They're stupid, but they're sensitive. See, this is why I tell you, when your kid comes home from school and you tell him, hey, so what do you think of this Gulf War crisis? What do you think of this September 11th things? Well, I feel that they did that for something. Why is your kid feeling? Your kid should be feeling anger and rage. And he shouldn't be feeling. What's he feeling? I feel what? See, and when you hear that, you should know immediately what kind of crap your kid is being taught. Your kid ain't supposed to feel, he's supposed to think. You didn't send him to school to learn to feel. You sent him to school to learn to think. Read, write, and do math. Let's see. I call that the I feel generation. Parents may consider today's public schools costly figures where children no longer learn. To the Frankfurt schools, they are successes. For the children coming out of them exhibit all the right attitudes. On entering college, these students know how to go through orientation sessions where they are instructed in the new values that to obtain on college campuses, to get their minds right, as the warden said on Cool Hand Luke. All right. During the 50s, the Frankfurt School lacked a personality to popularize the ideas that buried in the glutinous prose of Horkheimer and Adorno. Enter Herbert Mancuso, an ex-OSS officer and Brandeis professor, whose ambition was not only to be a man of words, but a revolutionary man of action. Marcuse provided the answer to Horkheimer's question, who will play the proletariat in the coming cultural revolution? Now remember, the proletariat in Russia were the working class. They wanted to have this grassroots working class revolt against the bourgeoisie, these owners, these capitalists. They felt that this would happen, but it failed in Russia. Why? Because 2,000 years of Christianity had settled in, and these people were unwilling to go to war at this point. So the question is asked, here the Frankfurt School in New York, they're establishing their doctrines of their critical theory and parents being bad. The question is posed, who will be the new proletariat in this new cultural revolution? Here's the answer. Marcuse's candidate: radical youth, feminists, black militants, homosexuals, the alienated, the antisocial. Now, did you know that this was the idea that they started propagating in the 50s? Let me ask you a question. When you see presidential candidates, in fact, you don't have to think too far, the last administration. Didn't it kind of drive you crazy that Bill Clinton gets sworn into office and the same day the first thing he tackles is homosexuality in the military and abortion? Think about all the stuff that's going on the planet, and those are the two most important things he decides he's going to tackle on the first day. What does that tell you? Huh? Who's going to play the role of the proletariat, the downtrodden? Who's going to be this victim class in this new uprising? Who's it going to be? Radical youth, feminists, black militants. Now, if I was black, I'd be pissed, because now I'm realizing every militant group out there is nothing more than puppets thinking they're chasing their agenda, but their agenda's been laid out for them. That's why they throw money at you so you can yell cracker. I'm not joking with you. I'm just telling you. These roles have been laid out and designed by white socialists. And we out here yelling, power to the people. Right according to script. Now, how's it make you feel? Huh? Black militants, homosexuals, alienated, the antisocial, third world revolutionaries, all the angry voices of persecuted victims of the West. Indians, Hispanics, ex-slaves. Everybody that's got a bitch against the West is going to be part of this grassroots movement. And do you know that's why they keep stirring this crap up? White man interned the Japanese. White man brought the slaves. White man took Mexico, California, Arizona, Texas, and Colorado from Mexico. Oh, they even went as far as taking the islands from the Hawaiians. Huh? Guam, Samoa, Puerto Rico. And the more they remind folk of this, what are they doing? Just getting a bunch of people mad. Now, what is the whole plot behind this? The whole plot behind this is that if you can eradicate America, the way you eradicate America is by eradicating Christianity. Now, y'all heard the stories. I mean, I don't think we need to concentrate on that Declaration of Independence, but you all know the story. Christopher Columbus discovered America, and everybody says, no, he didn't, because the Indians were here. That's true. They were already here. But did Spain know it was here? Huh? So if you're from Spain, what did Christopher Columbus do? Discovered America. Now, Christopher Columbus, was he a great navigator? No. Didn't even get halfway around the world. He thought he went around to India. He wasn't too bright. When he saw the people, he said, oh, these must be Indians. What happened to the turbans? Called them Indians. No, he wasn't bright at all. He wasn't smart. I admit that. We'll all face that. But just because he wasn't bright and wasn't smart, does it mean we can't do Columbus Day? Why do people always want to harp on the foolishness of these guys so you can throw out what happened as a result of what they did. Look, let's face the alternative. Somebody said, if the white man hadn't come, we don't know how it would have been. I know how it would have been. We'd have been living in dirt. Huh? Somebody said, but Brother Daniel, the Mexicans had pyramids. They ain't built none since. Look, man, I like that Aztec calendar. I get a kick out of that thing. Got the tongue sticking, all right? Yes, seen the Aztec calendar. Work of art. The Mayas were able to trace literally the stars and read history 4,000 years back through their mathematical calculations based on the stars. Great intelligence. But where'd it go? I mean, listen, God bless these folk, man. I mean, man, they had this stuff down. But where are they? They're dead. Listen, I love my people. I do. But you know what? Build me a pyramid, and I'll believe you. Build me a pyramid where when the sun sets, man, that snake travels right up the stairs like the ones they got down there. Build me one of those. And I'll take Mexico, I'll take California, Arizona, and, New Mexico, and all them places with you. But they can't do it. Right? It's like when they say, yeah, but, the black people built the pyramid. Well, build me another one. Build me a sphinx. I'll be with you. Where would we be if the white man didn't come? I don't know, where would we be? We'd probably be a skull on Montezuma's trophy case. Huh? I ain't joking with you. Somebody said, I'd have been a sportsman, and if you lost, they'd have killed you. I'm not lying to you. Man, Cortez became extremely Catholic when he saw what was happening. Man, the first time he saw all them heads and, priests cutting out hearts, man, bring the candles, man. I'm just telling you that this breakdown, this complete breakdown, and this attitude that what we have to do is bash America, bash everything about it, basically puts us in a place where what we're diminishing is the notion or the framework of America, which is Christianity, that came from Britain, that came from Europe, that came from Israel, that came from Judah, that came from Jerusalem. And I don't think we need to go into the origin of the ethnics as we did in the times past where we've been able to trace these things. Through psychological conditioning, not philosophical argument, America's children could be conditioned at school to reject their parents' social and moral beliefs as racist, sexist, homophobic, and conditioned to embrace a new morality. Through the Frankfurt School, although the Frankfurt School remains unfamiliar to most Americans, the ideals were well known in the teachers' colleges in the 40s, 50s. The school openly stated that whether children learn facts or skills at school was less important than that they graduate with the correct attitudes. So this new grassroots organization is going to be radical youth, feminists, black militants, homosexuals, alienated, antisocial, third world revolutionaries, all the angry voices of persecuted victims of the West. This was the new proletariat that would overthrow the Western culture. Now, who are the ones that are crying the loudest against Western culture? Homosexuals, black militants, black separatists, Aryans. Now, we can't just label there's been a lot to jump on this bandwagon since the 50s. All right? Got Mecha, all these groups. What are they doing? Isn't that funny that we live in a country where you can stand up and wave a Mexican flag at a soccer game and nobody shoots you? And then the first chance you get, you talk crap about the country that lets you do that? Huh? We live in a country where a Muslim can bow toward Mecca and do all his Allah stuff and then stand up and say, I hate the West. I would like to see it die. What a wonderful country it is that lets you do that and even lets you talk. This new proletariat group. Gramsci himself included all the marginalized group of history, not only economically oppressed, but also women, racial minorities, and many criminals. You ever watch the news where they show that those chain gangs busting rocks, and they yelling, "Oh, this ain't right, man. This ain't right." And right under his picture it says, child molester and murderer. And he's wearing a chain, wearing stripes, busting rocks, and he's, "Oh, this ain't right. This ain't right." Man, I'm looking for the chain on his neck with a dead dude on the other end. Now that's right. Could you imagine? Criminals too. Criminals who say, "Yeah, I got a felony, but man, I got the right to vote." Hey, would you believe this stuff was established in the 50s, in the 40s during the reign of Hitler? Would you believe this stuff was laid out? Now, this is for all those people who say, "Oh, come on, Daniel. You don't believe that stuff, do you? Did it all happen or didn't it? Right according to plan or didn't it?" Here, I'm going to stop there. If you want to read a book, a great book, probably one of the most profound books you'll ever read, read F.A. Hayek, The Road to Serfdom. One of the greatest books you will ever read on the whole planet. I'm telling you. I put this one right there with the key. F.A. Hayek, The Road to Serfdom. This actually was written. This is funny because when you talk about liberals today, that's not what liberals are when he wrote. All right, because back when we talked a little bit about it when FDR used to come out and start giving his speeches about the 4 freedoms, and you're thinking, 4 freedoms? He's given us 4 freedoms? He's going to give us a freedom from fear? We already had these freedoms, but he decided he was going to give them to us now. So everybody that believed in the government and believed in the president, they were referred to as conservatives. And if you were one of the people that said, whoa, less government, you don't give us peace, they called you a liberal. All right? If you're one of those people who say, wait a minute, I don't like subsidized farming. I don't want the government involved in business. They said, oh, you're a liberal. But nowadays, if you take that position, you're now a conservative. So when you read this book, you got to take that into account, because this all was written during the war with Germany. And in his first chapter, it's called The Abandoned Road. He's talking about the first road abandoned by the West, even back then in the 40s. And truth is timeless. But the first road abandoned by the West was the road of free capitalism, where people just said, well, we don't like the idea of people making a lot of money off of other folk. All right? I'm going to read a portion of this chapter, just so we can get a little taste of what this is about. Comes right in line with what we're reading there in Pat Buchanan. Here we go. It says, how sharp a break, not only with the recent past, but with the whole evolution of Western civilization, the modern trend towards socialism means become clear if we consider it not merely against the background of 19th century, but in a larger and longer historical perspective. And what it's saying is that for a nation or for a people to really make that break from freedom into socialism, it doesn't only mean to break from a 19th or even an 18th century perspective mindset. Because when you talk about 18th, 19th century, a lot of times what you're thinking about is France, Europe, France, Britain, France, England, America, because this is where we began to get our literature and our thinking when you start to read the great writers of the day. So it's not only talking about a great break in this historical perspective. It says we are rapidly abandoning not the views merely of Cobden, which was a writer, Bright or Adam Smith or Hume or Locke or Milton, and some of you that are familiar with U.S. history understand John Locke and Milton. But one of the salient characteristics of Western civilization as it has grown from the foundations laid by Christianity and the Greeks and the Romans. So you don't only break from 18th and 19th century philosophical ideas, you break from the ideas that are the very basis and roots of what this country is. Basically, what we refer to, or what they refer to in college courses, Western civilization, Greek, Roman, thus Europe, U.S. Not merely 19th and 18th century liberalism, but the basic individualism inherited by us from Erasmus, Montaigne, Cicero, Tacitus, Pericles, Thucydides, is progressively relinquished. The Nazi leader who described the National Socialist Revolution as counter-Renaissance spoke more truly than he probably knew. It was the decisive step in the destruction of that civilization which modern man had built up from the age of Renaissance, and which was above all an individualist civilization. Now we're going to stop there because we're out of time.